Everyone, Karl here, and welcome back to INC Live, and welcome to our latest post-fight reaction. Now, I have to give Bellator and One Championship a lot of credit for covering last week's gap in the MMA world, but for me, there's nothing better than a UFC Fight Night. We were back on ABC and in Venom this time for Marvin Vettori versus Kevin Holland. Let's get to the fights. And of course, we start with our main event with Marvin Vettori claiming a unanimous decision win over Kevin Holland to further extend his middleweight winning streak, while Holland falls to a second straight loss. Now, 3 weeks ago, I talked about Derek Brunson beating Kevin Holland and spent a lot of that write-up focusing on what Kevin was doing wrong. I could very easily cut and paste what I said in that write-up into this one as well. Now, it was always going to be hard to close the holes in Kevin's game in just 3 weeks. And to be fair, I thought he was much more focused this time around. He wasn't bad-mouthing in the way that he normally does. He tried making stuff happen off his back, and to an extent, I'd argue this was a bit more of a gracious loss than what we saw against Derek Brunson. But once again, the limited takedown defense, a lot of those holes in his game, proved his undoing. Vettori, I have to admit, he did struggle very early on with a couple of takedown attempts, but once he realised how to get Holland down, sort of angling off to the outside, pulling him off against the fence, he repeated that trick over and over until the 25 minutes were up. It sort of reaffirmed to me some of the feelings I have regarding Kevin Holland as a fighter. Now, don't get me wrong, he is a lot of fun. He's one of the best things to happen during the sort of MMA lockdown era. That sort of 5-fight winning streak was very enjoyable to watch, and the Jacare knockout is up there as one of the very best that you could see in the past, say, 5 or 6 years. I think the manner of his victories was enough to warrant the chance against the Brunsons and the Vettoris of the world, but I don't see him breaking the top 10. He's in that sort of same bracket for me as a Akhmedov or an Ian Heinisch. I think he's someone who's very solid, he can get a lot of entertaining fights out of you, but you don't ever see him being a title contender. I know he's spoken recently about possibly moving to welterweight, and honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to it. He's got the frame, in my opinion, to get down to 170. And what was evident to me looking at him and Vettori during the stare-downs, Marvin is a big, big lad, and that certainly can't help with the issues he has with his wrestling. Now, welterweight does have a lot of good wrestlers in that sort of top 10, top 15 bracket. But I think when he doesn't have that size disadvantage, it's not going to be as much of an issue as it would do against the Brunsons and the Vettoris of the world. If he can maintain his power in the same way that, say, Robbie Lawler did, because Robbie Lawler started off as a middleweight and then went down to welterweight, still maintained his power, and completely rebuilt his career. Can I say the same thing's going to happen to Kevin Holland? I'm not 100% sure of that. But I would be very open to seeing what he could do at that weight class. I want to know what you personally think of that. Should Holland maybe belong as a welterweight fighter? If not, who does he fight at 185? Is he starting to fight lower down the pecking order? Do you see him getting an Ian Heinisch or someone of that sort of ilk? A guy sort of outside the top 15 looking in? Tom Breeze, perhaps? In terms of Marvin Vettori, we've got a very intriguing situation. Now, there's a lot of arguments that Vettori should be getting the next title shot. He's got one of the best winning streaks in middleweight. He's highly ranked. And in my opinion, he got a much closer fight out of Adesanya than Whittaker did. But we've spoken before on this show that the UFC favours the flashier fighters, the guys who push for stoppage wins. And I think Vettori having this grappling heavy performance, not really looking close to a finish outside of the arm triangle, I don't think it's enough to warrant him the title shot from the UFC's eyes. Personally, I would go for him. I think it's a fresher matchup than, say, Robert Whittaker. I don't think, as good as Whittaker's been, I don't think I've seen the improvements that he needs to make to justify another chance at Adesanya, even though I think Whittaker is a better fighter. But if Bob puts on a clinic on Kelvin, like I suspect he may very well do, there's no arguing. He's going to be next in line for the title shot, and I think Adesanya is sort of hinting that mentally preparing himself for the possibility that Whittaker's going to be next. In terms of Marvin, I can honestly see them trying to book Darren Till again. I know that the company seems very high on Darren, and Marvin isn't going to have the same kind of takedown success like he did against Kevin Holland, so I would be interested to see it from that regard. Personally, I think Marvin's done more than enough to try and earn the title fight, but this is the UFC they're dealing with. You've got to think about the business side of the sport, and Marvin's just maybe not flashy enough to warrant the sort of big fights that he maybe deserves, and that's a sad truth. It's a shame for ABC that they had another main event be a blow-off, because of course it was Calvin Kattar back in January. He got dominated by Max Holloway, but I can't take anything away from Marvin. I've advocated for him for a long time, even before the Adesanya fight, so it is good to see him proving a lot of people wrong. And he's always been one of sort of the division's best kept secrets. Now people are realizing just how good the guy actually is. Speaking of proving a lot of people wrong, this brings me on to Mackenzie Dern. A first round submission over the former Nina Ansaroff in what was honestly a blow-off match. Now, there was a lot of criticism around Dern when she first came into the UFC. I think a lot of fans resented the coverage she was getting. Obviously, she's a very attractive girl, and she did have a lot of discipline issues regarding her weight. We all remember what happened when she fought Amanda Cooper, came in about 9 pounds overweight. And I think the impression a lot of people have was she was going to be an attraction fighter. Sort of what Paige VanZant would become later in her run. But she had a baby, took that loss against Hebas, and she has made big improvements to her all-round game. Because a lot of jiu-jitsu guys let themselves down because they don't like taking a punch. You can tell the moment they get hit, they just completely freeze. Dern doesn't seem to have that issue. She's fairly comfortable standing. I think her striking is maybe a bit sloppish, but she's willing to stand and trade and take these chances. It is almost to a fault because she did get clipped a couple of times in that fight, but once it hit the ground, there was only going to be one winner. With that being said, I do err on the side of caution, not because of Dern herself, but because of the quality of her opponent. You got to remember, Nina is 35 years old, she hasn't fought for 2 years, she's just had a baby herself, and in my opinion, I personally don't think that she is the 5th best strawweight in the world. I've got a feeling as to why she was placed so highly. I think anyone who follows me on social media knows what that is. But for me, it makes the scale of Dern's achievement look far better than what it is. That being said, there is a lot I liked about Dern. She was probably sort of like the MVP of last night's show. But I'm not going to call her a title challenger just yet, in the same way that I think a lot of people are maybe rushing to do so. What I can see, though, is her possibly being Joanna's next fight. Joanna's in a sort of strange situation where she's sort of a bit of a celebrity fighter. The matches she takes are either going to be title fights, or they have to be a really big matchup that justifies her getting back into action. I think her versus Dern, a Fight Night main event, sort of around September time, makes a lot of sense. It's going to test Joanna's takedown defense. It's going to test Dern's stand-up skill. Is Mackenzie going to be able to get that takedown against somebody who has always been known for her ability to stuff takedowns? We saw that when Joanna fought Carla Esparza. I think Rose is the only person to take Joanna down. Rose and Shevchenko in what? Her entire UFC career. So if Mackenzie Dern is able to get a win in that kind of fight, you've got to think to yourself, this is a girl who is worthy of all the hype and the attention that some people are rushing to give her at this moment in time. In terms of other fights on the card, I think Arnold Allen and Sadiq Yusuff, it was a great one for the hardcore fans. Two sort of sleeper fighters at featherweight. Third round maybe let itself down, but those first 2 rounds were very competitive, and I think we saw the best out of both guys. Sadiq is a fantastic, hard, pressure striker. Arnold was countering him a lot of the time. What did surprise me was Arnold having as much striking power as what he did. I'd always known Arnold for being sort of a bit of a points fighter, somebody who just sort of wears you down with punches rather than having that one-shot ability. So him rocking Sadiq Yusuff on 2 occasions in that fight took me by surprise. Featherweight is getting a bit stagnant right now, so you need the Arnold Allens of the world to sort of freshen it up. I think him versus Calvin Kattar or Josh Emmett, I think those would be very entertaining fights. I wouldn't risk putting him against a top 5 guy just yet, but you get through that, you're going to have to start taking Arnold Allen very seriously as a guy who could maybe break through and be a dark horse. A lot of people said the same thing about Volkanovski when he was starting to go through the Elkinses of the world. And then he got the Chad Mendes fight, and that basically turned him into a star. Elsewhere, I thought Julian Marquez, another fun performance. The guy is cringy as hell, but he's got a fun fighting style. He's embracing his character. I'm not sure if the booty shorts he was wearing was kind of a Miley Cyrus tribute. You wouldn't know when it comes to him. John McDessie's fight was a lot of fun. Personally, I think it should have got fight of the night. And I was very happy as well from a personal level to see Gamrot back in the winners column. I'd spoken very highly about Gamrot when he was fighting back in KSW. So when he lost that first fight against Guram, you had a lot of people having a go at me saying, oh, really? This is the guy you were hyping up so much? I think he answered a lot of those critics with that performance, and especially doing that to Sean Strickland. Like, Strickland is a very tough fighter in that division, and Gamrot, in my opinion, made it look fairly comfortable. Do want to end it on sort of a bit of a disappointing note, because I genuinely believe we've seen the last of Sam Alvey and Mike Perry in the UFC. And dare I say, from Mike's perspective, I hope it is his last performance too. His behaviour away from the cage is questionable. I know a lot of people know what John Martian thinks of him, but I don't think taking the shots he does so willingly is going to do his long-term health any good. It was uncomfortable seeing him in that state, and it's not the first time we've seen Mike Perry get in these wars willingly. And we all know about the effects of CTE. It's something I've always been concerned with from a personal level, and I would hate to see Mike get himself in such a state that he does something that hurts him or the people he loves. So maybe from Mike's own personal perspective, him leaving the UFC would maybe be a good idea. That was not a good performance. And there's only so many times you can go through those kind of wars before they eventually take their toll. On the whole, I think it was a very good show from ABC. Disappointing, of course, that they didn't have the competitive main event that they were hoping for. And I had to give a good call out for Venom as well. I had a lot of skepticism when I saw the initial stills of their fight kits, and I sort of even posted some like preemptive posts to say, oh, these are going to be even worse than what Reebok did. They did a good job with those kits. There's some things I don't like. I'm not keen on the design, especially with the white shorts. I think it emphasizes sort of the wrong areas. But the actual design itself, I think it's alternative, but it's corporate enough. You need that sort of mix between the two in a sport like mixed martial art, and in my opinion, Venom have done just that. That's everything from me regarding the UFC Fight Night. The middleweight title shot is going to come down to 3 people: Marvin Vettori, Robert Whittaker, and Kelvin Gastelum. One of those is going to be eliminated next week. That's going to be the main event we're going to be talking about. Whittaker versus Gastelum. I'll be here to review that one. I hope you are as well. This is the INC. Thank you for watching.